I want to analyze this thing of Bombay Bar Association and another bar association of Bombay is supporting Supreme Court's contempt proceedings against Mathew Nedumpara and actually complaining to the Supreme Court against two other lawyers who have supported Mathew Nedumpara by writing a letter of complaint to the Chief Justice. Now, I would have thought that Bombay Bar Association would support the bar against the bench. It's sort of like a trade union. It's a bit like seeing a trade union complain against two of the workers to the management and hailing the punishment that one of the workers got by the management. And it just sounds a bit funny. I know that this is not a trade union and their lawyers are not workers and so on. So I know there are some distinctions to be made. But even then, or let me give you another analogy. Suppose you have a students' union and suddenly one of the students gets rusticated. He may not belong to this union. He may have a union of his own. Now this student gets rusticated. And another two students and one more students' union actually writes to the college management saying that you shouldn't have rusticated him, and they write to the vice chancellor of the university, write a complaint against the management of the college, against the principal. And then the students' union writes a letter to the principal saying, rusticate these two guys also, because they complained against you to the vice chancellor. Now, I understand about rivalry, and I may be oversimplifying. I am just a common man looking at all this. But it seems a bit like, I don't know, is it like trying to paint yourself as a good boy in the eyes of the judiciary, in the eyes of the High Court? I'm so sorry, in the eyes of the judges. Are these guys trying to play the good boy? Is that what's happening here? Is there a kind of sycophancy happening here? What is going on? Are they being sycophants? Or are they acting rightly? It's just, as far as I'm concerned, it's a puzzling phenomenon. I'm going to discuss with some other lawyers tomorrow and try to figure this out. But what comes to me is that judiciary needs authority to enforce its orders. So when you question that authority, they try to preserve the authority by issuing notice of contempt and proceeding against you for contempt of court. Judiciary, when it acts against litigants, then there's a tendency for the bar and the bench to be united in the action. But when the bench acts against the bar, or members of the bench act against members of the bar, in this manner, then you start wondering what is the purpose of this authority and what is the nature of this authority that judiciary wields. Let us just understand what is authority. Every office has authority. Every government office, every private office has some measure of authority. You need authority, you need a hierarchy to function. You need the top persons in the hierarchy to exert authority. The orders must be obeyed, they must be followed. Discipline must be maintained for functioning of the office. So authority has to be maintained. However, let us replicate the Mathew Nedumpara incident in a normal office and see if it would be just cause, if it would be considered just cause for the kind of actions that the court has taken against Nedumpara. There is, let us say, Mr. A, who's the boss, and Mr. B, who is the employee. Mr. B has gone to Mr. A, the boss, for some work, and he makes a reference to Mr. A Senior, the father of the boss, for some reason. He says, even your father agrees with me. And the boss fires the employee. He sacks him. Or let us say he suspends him. Something like that. Does that sound reasonable? Does it sound like a normal, acceptable way of functioning? If such a case went to court, would it be considered as an adequate reason for sacking an employee, especially if the employee were protected by the labor laws, by the industrial laws? Would that be considered appropriate? I wonder. Anyhow, so we are just doing these thought experiments. My feeling is in everyday life, the conduct that the court requires from you would be considered autocratic, or rather the conduct of the court would be considered autocratic if this were translated into everyday life in offices, including government offices. And if the court required people like people who deal with them or the employees, if the offices required employees to act in ways that resemble the conduct of lawyers, then I think it would be considered slavery. It would be akin to slavery or slavishness. And it would be quite widely condemned. However, in the case of the court, we seem to make a very special kind of exception. Why? Why this kind of exception? One possibility is that people equate the authority of the judge with the authority of the king. It's a very king-like authority. It's like a monarch. And I think all the manner of addressing the court, your lordship, and all the rest of that, all the rest of the kind of talk that goes on, we crave leave and we pray and we humbly submit and so on and so forth. All of it is reminiscent of the behavior of a subject in front of a monarch. If the judges are monarchs, then the advocates are like the courtiers and the litigants are like the subjects. So the monarch cannot be directly addressed by the subject. The subject needs to approach the monarch through a courtier whom the monarch recognizes, and the monarch is comfortable only if he is addressed through the courtier, because the courtier knows how to address him. He knows all his eccentricities and all the mannerisms, the verbal mannerisms. He knows how to bow, he knows how to kowtow before him. He knows what to write, how to reason with him, when to stop reasoning, when to stop arguing, all those things. So basically, I suspect that what we have here is a kind of a monarchical situation. Now, of course, the power of the monarchs rub off on those who are closest to the monarch. And so you have an aristocratic class, people favored by the monarch. And these are your senior counsels. As far as the common public is concerned, as far as litigants are concerned, the senior counsels are very, very powerful and they have direct links with the monarchs. And for such privilege, they have to be paid handsomely. How handsomely? They have to be paid indecent amounts, because they are aristocrats. They have direct access to the monarch. They have access to the mind of the monarch. The monarch will listen to them. They have the inner track of the monarch. That's my theory. So, the crime of the offense of Mathew Nedumpara is the offense of offending the monarch. Just offending the monarch. The monarch got angry. Why did he get angry? You said the wrong thing. What sort of wrong thing? Well, it didn't please the monarch, so it's the wrong thing. If the monarch were not displeased, then you would not have any problems. And now, what is currently Mathew's state is, he is given an undertaking, an ill-advised undertaking, in my opinion, but that is not for me to say. He's done it within his own circumstances, and maybe he has reasons to do this, but he has given an undertaking, an affidavit, stating that he will not browbeat another Supreme Court or High Court judge Supreme Court, he will not be allowed to approach for a year. For 1 year, he cannot appear before Supreme Court. So he has been banished from the kingdom, the inner kingdom of the Supreme Court. He is no longer part of the charmed inner circle. He was never part of the charmed inner circle. He was never a designated senior counsel. But he was allowed to approach the monarchs. He was allowed to speak before the monarchs. And now he is no longer allowed to speak before the Supreme Court, the monarchs. He is allowed to speak before Bombay High Court, approach any High Court, appear on behalf of clients before any High Court, but now he has a sword hanging on his head. If any judge of Bombay High Court feels the slightest bit of displeasure, that judge will just say one magic word: browbeat. The judge will say, "You are browbeating me." So browbeat has become a magic word which can be used against Mathew Nedumpara. And if that judge says the magic word browbeat, then Nedumpara will be sent straight to jail for 3 months. So every judge of Bombay High Court, and I argue that it is likely that even other judges, even magistrates, may use the same power, although it is not explicitly for them. If they just say this magic word browbeat, then they can send Mathew Nedumpara to jail for 3 months straight away. Again, the order only says Bombay High Court, but I suspect that if he appears before some other High Court, like say Madras High Court, and the Madras High Court judge says browbeat, then I suspect that the same kind of thing may apply. In any case, Matthews will be left fighting for his freedom. So essentially, Matthews is at the mercy of each and every judge that he appears before. He cannot express his mind freely. He will not be able to argue, as they say, without fear or favor. He has to fear. He has to fear before each and every judge. How many of his clients are going to stand by him now in this situation? If I were his client, I wouldn't give him any cases. And the reason is very simple. His power to argue is gone. This is what the Supreme Court has done. Why? Because he said, Fali Nariman. Insulting the monarch is a bit like blasphemy. Blasphemy laws seem to come from the same thing. In India, if Fali Nariman, if Mathew Nedumpara or anyone else had said in front of Supreme Court, if he had said in front of Rohinton, there is no such God as Ram. Lord Rama is not a God. He wouldn't have been held in contempt of court. Lord Krishna is not a God. Allah is not a God. Muhammad is a false prophet. If he had said all these things, no contempt of court. No contempt of court. If he had said, I think Zoroastrianism isn't a genuine religion, then I have a feeling that Rohinton Fali Nariman would have said that now you are being insulting to me personally, so contempt of court. So it's not about what went wrong in general, it is about what Fali Nariman took offense to. According to Fali Nariman, so sorry, why do I keep saying Fali Nariman? Rohinton Nariman. What Rohinton Nariman took offense to. Rohinton Nariman took offense to the mention of his father, Fali Nariman. He took offense to that. Anything that Rohinton Nariman had taken offense to would have been blasphemy. So what I'm saying here is, look at the weakened situation of every lawyer. I wonder why Bombay Bar Association hailed that judgment and sent that letter of support and that complaint against the advocates Nilesh, Ojha and Vijay, Kurle. Why did they do that? Don't they see that every advocate will have to live in fear of offending that judge, any judge? You go before Rohinton and if you say Fali Nariman, boom, you are in contempt. You go before, let us say there is some Justice Gupta or Justice Shah or Justice Mehta, and if you say your father, bam, contempt. If you say your uncle, he might take offense to that. My uncle brought me up. My uncle is as dear to me as my father. Contempt. If you say Honda City, the judge might say, wait a minute, I drive a Honda City. And so, you have insulted my vehicle. Bam, contempt. Where is the limit? Where is the limit? If you say anything at all, if it offends the judge, contempt. That's the precedent. That is the precedent. And that contempt, there will be no hearing. There will be no hearing. It will be contempt in the face of the court. Earlier, you had to throw a chappal. To be condemned without a hearing, to be held guilty of contempt and convicted without a hearing. You have to do something dramatic like throw a chappal at a judge. Now, you just say the wrong word. Contempt in the face of the court. That is the precedent. Look at this dangerous precedent that Rohinton Fali Nariman has gone and set. And Bombay Bar Association has hailed this precedent. That's amazing. That's amazing. Now what I would like to ask the members of Bombay Bar Association and the other Bar Association is, are you sure it's a good idea to hail this kind of judgments which weakens you guys? Does it make sense for your association to hail and support such judgments? I think all of you have been weakened. It's not only Mathew Nedumpara. Any judge will cite the same judgment and send any of you to jail straight away. There is an erosion in the power of the bar in general. It's weird. It is weird how the Bar Association could have hailed this kind of a draconian judgment Weird. From the common man's perspective, which I speak of, it appears that we are dangerously close to the return of blasphemy laws. It is so easy. This is almost like a blasphemy law. You offended the monarch. You are in trouble. It's that simple. This is a huge sliding backwards. What the hell are the lawyers thinking? Are you going to stand by while this happens in India? Please think about it. Good night.